Ah, there you are. Pull up a chair by the fireside. I'm going to tell you a story, but it's not for the faint of heart. My name is Julia Norton, and you're listening to Dark and Twisty Tales, a weekly telling of the lesser-known and more grisly folk stories and fairy tales. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. The Goose Girl. There once lived an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years. She had a beautiful daughter, and when the daughter grew up, she was betrothed to a prince who lived a long way away. Soon the time for the marriage arrived, and the daughter had to leave for the foreign land where the prince lived. The old queen packed all manner of costly things, gold and silver, fine goblets and rare jewels of every kind, everything that was suitable for a royal dowry, for she loved her daughter with all her heart. She also gave her a maidservant who was to ride with her and make sure she arrived safely at the bridegroom's palace. Each of them had a horse for the journey. The princess's horse was called Falada, and he could speak. When it was time to leave, the old queen went into her bedchamber, took a knife, and cut her finger. She let 3 drops fall onto a white handkerchief and gave it to her daughter, saying, "My dear child, take good care of this. You will need it on your journey." They then said a sad farewell. The princess put the handkerchief into her bodice, and they set off on the journey to her bridegroom. When they had ridden for an hour, the princess felt a burning thirst and said to her maidservant, "Could you get down and bring me some water from the brook in that golden goblet you're carrying? I'm so thirsty, I must have something to drink." The maid said, "Get it yourself if you're thirsty. You can just lie over the stream and lap it up. I'm not going to wait on you." The princess was so thirsty that she did just that. The maid wouldn't even let her use the goblet. "Dear Lord," thought the princess, and the 3 drops of blood replied, "If your mother knew of this, it would break her heart." But the princess was humble. She said nothing and remounted her horse. They rode on for a few more miles, but the day was warm, the sun was scorching, and soon she grew thirsty again. When they came to another stream, she said to the maidservant, "Could you bring me some water in the golden goblet?" She had forgotten the maidservant's harsh words, but the maid said even more haughtily, "I've told you I'm not waiting on you. If you're thirsty, get down and drink for yourself." The princess got down again and drank from the stream. She wept a little, and again she thought, "Dear Lord." Again the 3 drops of blood responded silently, "Oh, if your mother knew, her heart would break in 2." And as the princess leaned over the stream and sipped the water, the handkerchief fell out of her bodice and floated away. She didn't even notice it in her distress, but the maidservant had seen it, and she gloated. She knew that the princess was weak and powerless now. So when the princess wanted to remount Falada, the maid said, "What do you think you're doing? That's not your horse. I'm having him now, and in fact, you can take off all your fancy clothes and give them to me, and you can wear these dingy rags of mine. Go on, hurry up." The princess had to do as she said, and then the maidservant made her swear under the open heavens not to say one word about it in the royal court. If she hadn't taken that oath, the maidservant would have killed her on the spot. But Falada saw all of this and took good note of it. So, with the chambermaid riding Falada and the true princess riding the nag, they went on their way till they came to the royal palace. There was a great rejoicing when they arrived, and the king's son ran ahead to meet them. Naturally, he thought that the chambermaid was his bride, and he lifted her down from her horse and led her upstairs, while the real princess was left standing below. The old king looked out of the window and noticed her waiting in the courtyard, and thought how beautiful she was, how fine and delicate her features. So he went at once to the royal apartments and asked the bride about the girl she had with her, the one who was standing below in the courtyard. "I picked her up on the way to keep me company," said the false bride. "Give her some work to do. She'll only laze around otherwise." But the old king had no work to give her.
"I suppose she could help the goose boy,"
he said. So the true bride had to tend the geese along with the little goose boy, whose name was Conrad. A little while later the false bride said to the king's son, "Husband, dearest, I'd like you to do something for me." "Of course," he said. "I'd do it gladly." "Then send for the knacker and have him cut the head off the horse I rode here," she said. "The brute gave me an awful lot of trouble on the way." In fact, of course, she was afraid that Falada might tell the truth about how she had behaved with the princess. The longer he stayed alive, the greater the risk that the truth would come out. So it was arranged, and the faithful Falada had to die. The real princess heard about it, and she secretly promised the knacker a gold coin if he would do her a small favour. In the city wall there was a large dark gateway, through which she had to drive the geese every morning. She asked the knacker if he'd hang Falada's head in there, where she could see it when she passed through. The knacker agreed and nailed the head up on the wall by the gate. Early next morning, when she and Conrad drove the flock of geese out through the gateway, she said as she passed, "Oh, poor Falada hanging there." And the head answered,
"Oh, princess with the golden hair, if your dear mother knew, her heart would break in two."
The princess said no more, and she and Conrad drove the geese out into the fields. When they came to the right spot, she sat down and loosened her hair, which was the purest gold. Conrad loved to watch her do this, and he reached up and tried to pull out a strand or two. So she said, "Wind, strong wind, take Conrad's hat and blow it here and there. Let him chase it all around until I've done my hair." And such a strong wind started blowing that it snatched Conrad's hat and blew it right across the meadow, and then led him a chase up and down, this way and that, until he managed to catch up with it. By that time the princess had combed and braided her hair and tied it up in a bun, and there were no loose strands for Conrad to tug, so he sulked and didn't say another word that day. When evening came, they drove their flock home again. Next morning, as they went through the gateway in the city wall, the girl said, "Oh, poor Falada hanging there." And the head answered,
"Oh, princess with the golden hair, if your dear mother knew, her heart would break in two."
When they reached the meadow once again, the princess sat down to braid her hair. And once again Conrad tried to pluck a strand of it, and once again she said, "Wind, strong wind, take Conrad's hat and blow it here and there. Let him chase it all around until I've done my hair." The wind blew up suddenly and snatched little Conrad's hat again, and gave him such a chase up and down the meadow that by the time he'd caught the hat, the princess had done her hair again, and there were no strands to pluck at. And so they tended their geese until evening. When they returned to the palace, Conrad went to the old king and said, "I don't want to tend the geese with that girl any more." "Why not?" said the old king. "Oh, she annoys me all day long." "Well, what does she do?" "In the morning, when we go through the gate in the city wall, she talks to the head of the old nag that's nailed up there. She says, 'Oh, poor Falada hanging there,' and the head says, "Oh, princess with the golden hair, if your dear mother knew, her heart would break in two." Then Conrad went on to tell the king what happened in the goose meadow and how she made the wind blow his hat about.
"Well, you just go out with her tomorrow as normal," said the old king, "and I'll be watching."
So in the morning the old king wrapped himself in a cloak and sat inside the gateway and heard the princess talking to Faladar's head. Then he followed them discreetly out to the meadow and hid himself among the bushes to watch what happened. Just as Conrad had told him, the Goose Girl summoned the wind. "Wind, strong wind, take Conrad's hat and blow it here and there. Let him chase it all around until I've done my hair." And it blew Conrad's hat all over the meadow, and she unpinned her beautiful long golden hair and braided it up again. The king saw it all, and then went back to the palace. When the Goose Girl came back in the evening, he called her to come to him and asked her why she did those things. "I'm not allowed to tell you," she said. "It's a secret. I can't tell anyone. I had to swear under the open heavens that I wouldn't say a word about it. If I hadn't sworn, I'd have been killed." The old king tried to persuade her, but she wouldn't be moved. Nothing would make her break her vow. But finally he said,
"I'll tell you what. Don't tell your troubles to me. Tell them to the iron stove in the corner. That way you'll be keeping your vow, and you can still unburden yourself."
So she crept into the old iron stove, and there she began to cry, and soon she had poured out her whole heart.
"Here I sit, all alone and forsaken by the whole world, and all the time I'm the daughter of a king. A false maidservant forced me to change my clothes with her, and she took my place as the bride, and now I have to work in a meadow looking after geese. If my mother knew about this, it would break her heart in two."
The old king was standing outside by the chimney, and he heard everything she said. He came back inside and told her to come out of the stove. He had her dressed in royal clothes, and it was a wonder to see how beautiful she was. Then the old king summoned his son and explained that his bride had been married to him by deceit and that she was no princess but only a maidservant. His true bride was right there, the one who had been the Goose Girl. When the king's son saw how lovely the true bride was and learned how virtuously she had behaved, he was full of joy. They ordered a great feast, to which all the court and every good friend they had were invited. At the head of the table sat the bridegroom, and on one side sat the false bride, and on the other the true one. The maidservant was completely taken in because she didn't recognize the princess in her beautiful dress. After they had eaten and drunk and were all in good spirits, the old king put a riddle to the false bride.
"What punishment would someone deserve if they had treated their mistress in this way?"
And he told her the whole story, asking again when he finished,
"What sentence does such a person deserve?"
The false bride said, "She deserves nothing better than to be stripped naked and put in a barrel studded on the inside with sharp nails. Then 2 white horses should be harnessed to it and drag her up and down the streets until she's dead."
"That is you," said the old king. "You have pronounced your own sentence. Everything you describe shall be done to you."
And when the sentence had been carried out, the king's son married his true bride, and they reigned over their kingdom in peace and happiness. Thank you for listening to Dark and Twisty Tales. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes, rate, review, and share with all your friends. You can also get more information about me, Julia Norton, at julianorton.com. So, until the next time, bye.